What's up, guys? Swift here, and today I'm covering some narratives and some rumors that are going around NFL circles regarding the Chicago Bears. Some people are questioning if Caleb Williams wants to be a Chicago Bear. There's also a lot of chatter about Shane Waldron's struggles in Seattle and more. Let's get right into it. First off, let's get into this Caleb Williams talk. Here we go again with Colin Cowherd. He's one of the few media guys I've addressed on this channel before. He simply makes stuff up for clicks more often than not. And now we're doing it again. This time he came out and said that Caleb doesn't want to play in Chicago. This caused all kinds of outrage on Twitter this week, but then he went on to 670 The Score yesterday and backtracked his comments a bit. He said Caleb will not pull a John Elway or Eli Manning, and he would play for the Bears if he gets drafted here, but he said there's other teams he'd rather play for. Colin Cowherd also said there are multiple teams putting together big trade offers to trade up to number one for the Bears. But when it comes to the Caleb Williams talk and a lot of what Colin Cowherd says, I just usually don't believe it or take it with a grain of salt. He definitely has some connections. I feel like he could have talked to Caleb's dad. People have also told me he's a booster for USC's program and heavily involved in that school. So he definitely has connections there, but the whole story is overblown and not really worth making a huge fuss out of. But I do want to take a step back for a second and think about this from a different point of view. If you weren't a Bears fan and Caleb Williams was your son, would you want him to be drafted by the Chicago Bears right now? First, in order to answer that question fairly, you would have to detach yourself from the franchise as a fan, and that's just impossible to do. But the question is fair to ask. Would you yourself want to get drafted to the team that has the worst QB production in the NFL? A team whose head coach could potentially get fired if you don't win this season? A city with unrealistic expectations, a wildly passionate fan base, an in-your-face media group, and the craziest wind and freezing cold temperatures that tend to favor running the ball more than throwing it? And then you pair all of that with a locker room that is openly in support of Justin Fields and a fan base that was chanting, "We want Fields" at the last home game. Is it possible that Caleb or someone in his family would rather go to another football team other than the Chicago Bears? Of course it is. But that doesn't mean he wouldn't want to play here if we drafted him. Everyone has teams they would rather play for, but that's not how the NFL works. You don't get to choose where you get drafted. So let's take all of those rumors with a grain of salt and let's let the situation play out. I focused on scouting players at the Senior Bowl all week, and I let these crazy rumors get overblown, but I did want to put some of them to rest. I'm glad I was at the Senior Bowl this week, but next up I wanted to talk about this other narrative I see going around with Shane Waldron's struggles in Seattle. And I use air quotes when I say struggles in Seattle because to me that's a narrative. I keep seeing people talk about Seahawks fans being glad that he's gone and how much the Seattle Seahawks offense struggled this year. So let's go back a little bit. Seattle traded away Russell Wilson, and the offense was supposed to be handed over to Drew Lock. And honestly, most analysts and media guys expected them to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. But Shane Waldron liked the work he did the previous year with Geno Smith. He had already worked a year with Geno Smith on the bench behind Russell Wilson before they traded for Drew Lock. And he saw something in this 31-year-old journeyman who hadn't thrown for over 2,000 yards in nearly 6 years. And Waldron got him to throw for nearly 8,000 yards and 50 touchdowns in 2 seasons. He threw for 7,906 yards. If he didn't miss a few games this year, he was on pace to throw for over 4,000 again. He went to the Pro Bowl both years under Shane Waldron. Now sure, Seahawks fans are disappointed because they didn't win a Super Bowl, and they went 17-15 in those years, making the playoffs last year and just missing out this year. But to get 8,000 yards and 50 touchdowns in 2 seasons, that kind of production out of a career journeyman in Geno Smith, you can't forget who the quarterback is. Justin Fields has been way better than what Geno was before he worked with Shane Waldron. So you can't say the offense struggled with him. To me, he got way more production out of that offense than anyone ever imagined. You have to use context in the situation. The defenses did adjust to them a bit this season, and the Seahawks offensive line had a ton of issues. But stats and charts only show so much. Sure, Seattle fans aren't happy with the end results, but if we had an offensive coordinator ever get 8,000 yards passing out of any of the journeyman quarterbacks for us we've had over the last 20 years, this fan base would be ecstatic. And that's not lowering the bar either. That's adding context to the situation. The Seahawks had a ton of issues, including the offensive line and the defense, but I do not believe that Shane Waldron was amongst their biggest problems. I think these rumors and clamorings from fans are being vastly overblown. To me, Shane Waldron is one of the best play callers in the NFL, and the work he did in Seattle was awesome. Let's give him a chance in Chicago before worrying about what some mad fans on social media say. But finally, there was a ton of NFL coaching hires this week, and it was interesting to me that neither Ben Johnson or Bobby Slowick ended up landing head coaching jobs. This was a year for defensive head coaches to get hired. But an interesting note was that former Michigan coach Jim Harbaugh is now the head coach of the Chargers. Harbaugh was interviewed and said that J.J. McCarthy was the #1 quarterback in this draft, and he actually believes he will be the first QB taken. Whether that means the #1 pick or the #2, Harbaugh said he actually believes that. This one was interesting to me, but again, not a big story. I know a lot of fans wanted Jim Harbaugh here, but if he really would have wanted to take J.J. McCarthy #1 overall, I'm glad he's not with us. But honestly, this is probably just an instance of Harbaugh hyping up the quarterback that he just coached to a national championship. He has Justin Herbert with the Chargers, so he's not going to draft him. He's probably just trying to help out JJ's draft stock and do the kid a favor. Again, not a huge story, but something I wanted to mention. And then finally, something that's going a bit underlooked. Ian Cunningham is staying here for one more year to work with Ryan Poles in such a huge offseason. That is a big, big win for the Bears, and I love it. You won't hear a lot of people talking about it, but Ian Cunningham sticking around is big for us. I have a ton more Senior Bowl coverage on the way. The game is over. You can catch it on NFL Network, but I'll be breaking down the players who were at the Senior Bowl and other NFL draft prospects all the way up until the draft. It's draft season, baby. Also, check out an interview with Clay Harbaugh dropping on the 3 Point Stands podcast channel. Stay tuned for more coverage. Hit that like button for me, and until next time, bear down.